Each victim died in a cold, watery grave. Such conduct is unspeakable. They are despicable crimes involving senseless yet sadistic conduct perpetrated against two defenceless individuals.
January 24th, 2016, a murder case was about to unfold that would shock Australia to the core. Cory Breton and Iuliana Triscaru were lured to a unit in Kingston, tortured and locked in a metal toolbox before being submerged in Scrubby Creek lagoon, where their bodies were later discovered. Coined as the Toolbox Murders, this is one of the most disturbing cases of drug-related violence in recent memory, in Australia or anywhere for that matter. This is the shocking story of the Toolbox Murders. First, we need to understand who the victims of this awful crime were and how they ended up where they were on that fateful day in 2016. The simple answer, as it so often is in these tales, is that Cory Breton and Iuliana Triscaru's lives collided in the shadowy underbelly of Brisbane's drug trade. Cory, 28, was father to a 3-year-old daughter. His days split between a typical family life and a second existence, working on sourcing drugs. His partner, Miranda Parkinson, recalled him dropping her off at Brisbane Airport on January 20th, 2016, just days before he vanished. A network of deals and debts connected him to Stu Daniels, a man central to this story for a very violent reason. Iuliana, who was 31 at the time of her death, was a woman who kept her own secrets. A Romanian immigrant living her life in Australia, she got caught up in the same shadowy world as Cory. To her mother, Victoria Duggar, she was a bright, colourful daughter whose laughter once filled their home, a complete contrast to her life in the drug trade, where she was just another peddler pounding the streets to make ends meet. Even though we don't know much about her life in the lead up to a violent end, court records later revealed that she was bonded to Cory, sharing a network in the brutal world they lived in. Their professional and personal partnership was a lifeline in an environment where alliances shifted like sand. Cory's supplier ties and Iuliana's network of contacts brought them together in business. Sadly, in their line of work, one misstep could get you in a world of trouble. In their case, that was to get on the wrong side of Stu Daniels, to make him believe they were a threat to his business. His wrath was, in the end, what led to their untimely demise. In life, Cory and Iuliana were bound by circumstance. In death, their stories became inseparable. It all started with a single photograph, a still taken from CCTV that unexpectedly sealed their fate. Cory often visited a convenience store in Logan to pick up burner phones. One day, the owner of the store showed him an image of Stu Daniels and asked Cory if he recognised the man. Cory confirmed he knew who Daniels was and went on his way. He didn't realise it, but the store owner went to Daniels and told him about his exchange with Cory. Daniels didn't see it as a casual chat. He believed that Cory and his associate, Iuliana, were planning on using their knowledge of his identity to give him up to the police, something he wasn't willing to chance. Daniels soon enlisted Davey Malu Jr. Tayau, Trent Michael Thrupp, and Waylon Yakito Cowan Walker, all contacts and part of Daniels' network. They plotted to do what it took to keep Cory and Iuliana quiet, and killing them would certainly do the job. The plan was centered around exploiting Cory's trust, lure the pair out, making them believe they are heading to a routine drug deal. Once they had them on site, the men would capture them and planned to torture them to make them talk. If they didn't cooperate, or if they admitted that Daniels' fear that the pair were about to out him to the police, they would finish the job and make sure they could never talk. On January the 24th, they put their plan into action. Cory and Iuliana arrived at a unit in Kingston, south of Brisbane, as planned, under the impression that this was just an ordinary drug deal. What they didn't realise was that it was Daniels' setup. He was there waiting for them with Tayau, Thrupp and Cowan Walker, ready to enact their plan, fueled by Daniels' paranoia. Upon entering the unit, Cory and Iuliana were ambushed and taken captive. Over several hours, the pair were subjected to sustained physical and psychological torment. They were bound using zip ties and tape, beaten, stabbed and put through a world of pain. Leland Harrington, another member of Daniels' entourage who was later convicted of lesser charges, testified in court that Daniels was the one who dominated the violence towards the victims, demanding they confess to a non-existent plot against him. Cory, aware of his impending fate, reportedly pleaded, "Help, I'm going to die," as he was forced into a 2-meter-long metal toolbox. Amid all of the chaos, Iuliana actually managed to wriggle free for a short time, causing a frantic scramble. Harrington, who later claimed he did not believe when he joined proceedings that the group actually intended to kill their marks, was the one to sound the alarm, shouting, "She's getting away!" The group of men quickly recaptured her, pinning her down and binding her, this time making sure she couldn't escape. With the victims trapped inside the box, the men loaded it onto a Toyota Hilux ute owned by Tuirangi Thomas Tahiata. The convoy headed to a quarry, but found the entrance locked, meaning they had to find an alternative dumping location. They quickly diverted to Scrubby Creek Lagoon near the Logan motorway. The killers weighted the toolbox with concrete blocks and tyres, then pushed it into the lagoon. When it initially floated, Tahiata fired a shotgun blast to silence the victims' cries, though this only amplified their pleas. A claw hammer was used to puncture the metal, allowing water to flood in. Forensic analysis later suggested the pair likely suffocated or drowned, though decomposition made the exact cause of death impossible to determine. The fatal flaw in Daniel's logic was that killing these two drug dealers would save him from the law. The reality was, killing them would actually lead the police to his door eventually. Before long, police were alerted to the two missing people when neither one returned home to their waiting families. Officers were quickly able to place crime scenes across Kingston, including the unit where the pair were tortured and nearby waterways where the bodies might have been disposed of. Given the pair's ties to the local drug trade, Stu Daniels and his network of associates were almost immediately suspected. Witness accounts and CCTV footage placed the victims at the Kingston unit, where forensic teams later uncovered bloodstains and evidence of a violent struggle. Then, on February 11th, 2016, divers discovered the submerged toolbox in Scrubby Creek Lagoon, weighted with concrete blocks and tyres. That's when investigators learned the grim truth. Cory and Iuliana's bodies, severely decomposed, were curled up inside the rusting container. Within hours, the police arrested Daniels, Davy Malou Jr. Tayao, and Trent Michael Thrupp, who were promptly charged with murder. The advanced decomposition of the bodies inside the toolbox made it almost impossible to work out the exact cause of death. Autopsies could not confirm whether the victims died from asphyxiation, drowning, or injuries sustained during their torture. Witness testimonies and crime scene analysis painted a harrowing picture. The pair endured hours of confinement, with screams heard as the toolbox was transported to the lagoon. They had been alive and subjected to the worst kind of torture and a painful, struggling death at the hands of their tormentors. Digital evidence was central to the investigation, with phone records and CCTV footage used to reconstruct the timeline of events. Key witnesses, like Leland Harrington, who had been part of the group acting on Daniel's orders, but seemingly had a change of heart, or at least wanted to try and minimize his own sentence, gave detailed accounts to confirm exactly what happened to Cory and Iuliana. However, the words of men who had histories of substance abuse and mental health problems was hardly a way to build a prosecution, which was going to be the main argument of the defense when the trial began. 9 individuals were ultimately charged with the double murder, with Daniels, Tayao, Thrupp and Walker accused of being the central figures behind the crime. The main members of the group were arrested within hours of the toolbox being discovered, with others like Harrington, who were involved more with the disposal of evidence, facing lesser charges. The trial, however, would not begin until 2021, some 5 years after the arrests were made. Prosecutors presented the jury with a pretty damning case, built around CCTV footage, forensics and witness testimonies. Surveillance videos captured the victim's arrival at the Kingston unit, while phone records traced the perpetrator's movements to Scrubby Creek Lagoon. Key testimony came from Leland Harrington, who admitted his role in alerting the group to Iuliana's escape attempt, and to Tuirangi Thomas Tahiata, whose ute transported the toolbox. The jury heard how Daniel's paranoia about being set up by Cory and Iuliana fueled the attack. Forensic evidence, including bloodstains at the unit and tool marks on the toolbox, corroborated witness accounts of the prolonged violence they faced, with Harrington claiming Daniels had slashed at Iuliana's arms as she tried to stop them from closing the toolbox. Even if it wasn't possible to tell exactly how the pair had died due to decomposition, the court accepted that the victims endured unspeakable evil, as put by Justice David Boddice, before they suffocated or drowned in the box. In March 2021, Daniels, Tayao and Thrupp were sentenced to life imprisonment with non-parole periods of 30 years. Justice Boddice called it senseless yet sadistic conduct. Walker, who fled to New Zealand after the murders, received a 12-year sentence for manslaughter, as the court found he participated in the disposal but did not directly inflict fatal violence to the victims at the unit in Kingston. It may seem like that would be a fitting end to the story, but in a strange twist of fate, the case was dredged back up in July 2024. Queensland's Court of Appeal overturned the murder convictions of Daniels, Tayao and Thrupp. Not because of a lack of evidence or suspicion that they had been set up, it was due to issues with the instructions given to the jury. Retrials were ordered for all of the men. The convictions for the torture of Cory and Iuliana were not in dispute, only those for murder. Walker's manslaughter conviction was also overturned because there wasn't enough evidence to prove his intent. The retrials for murder have yet to take place. The murders of Cory Breton and Iuliana Triscaru, brutalised, confined and drowned in a toolbox, stand out even amongst the stories we read every day of drug-related violence. It was a truly barbaric attack, carried out due to nothing more than Stu Daniels' irrational fears. It robbed two families of their loved ones. Iuliana's mother mourned a daughter tortured in body and soul, while Cory's child will live without a father. Even if Daniels, Tayao and Thrupp face retrials, the fact remains that even with the huge pile of evidence that the prosecution was built on, forensics, CCTV, phone records, witness statements, everything you might need, a technicality means that these men are still not facing absolute justice for the obscene act of violence they carried out on that January day back in 2016. For now, this brings us to the end of this case. I want to say thank you to user NanUpTiger who suggested I look into this case. If anyone has any other suggestions, please let me know down below in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video and want more stories from the Australian underworld, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. Till next time, take care.